Queensland Aviation Services via video conference. And for the Hansard record, could you please give your name and the capacity in which you appear today?
Mary Brown, joint owner of North Queensland Aviation Services.
I invite you to make a brief opening statement before the committee asks questions. Do you wish to make an opening statement?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Good morning and thank you, Senators. I would like to thank the members present for the opportunity today to speak to my Senate submission to the current state of Australia's general aviation industry, with particular reference to the aviation in rural and remote Australia. This Senate inquiry is incredibly important because it gives the general aviation sector an opportunity to be heard, an opportunity to be honest and bold, and an opportunity to be acknowledged for the significant contribution this sector makes to the whole of Australia. I speak today as a representative of those communities, our communities, to whom aviation is an integral component of our very existence, our connectivity and our sustainability. Our communities who rely so intrinsically on aviation for many of their everyday needs are often taken for granted by more urban centres and whose voices are not often heard. I speak today for our aviation community to voice the concerns regarding the decline in general aviation we have been witnessing for some time, and as a voice to call for the decision makers to listen and act urgently to address these concerns before livability, skills and opportunities are completely lost from our regions. I ask the members present to consider the vastness of our country, and I'm sure many of you have travelled its length and breadth and understand the tyranny of distance of this great nation. Yet it is in rural and remote Australia, despite these distances, that is the home to communities supporting industries that contribute significantly to the GDP of Australia. Regional Australia is an economic driver, and those residing in the regions rely considerably on general aviation to get the job done. It absolutely beggars belief that in 2020, GA is experiencing such catastrophic decline in those very same regions. From passenger transport, essential medical evacuations, commodity supplies, agricultural applications, GA is essential to livability, connectivity and economic prosperity to the regions, as I've said. Add to this the significant role GA plays in times of natural disaster, and one begins to broaden their thinking. I don't think many would dispute the critical role that aircraft contributed during the last couple of years alone, starting with providing invaluable support through the duration of the 2019 monsoon flood events in Queensland, and then the vital aerial reinforcement provision during the devastating bushfires, as examples of the absolute importance that GA plays in times of need. To explain the impact GA has had on this sector today, I will share with you our own personal aviation story. I was introduced to general aviation as a 15-year-old schoolgirl living in a rural community, and was fascinated that a couple of my fellow students were learning to fly at a local flying school. I was impressed that our small town had the capacity to enable anyone who had the motivation to undertake their training locally, and on the day of their 16th birthday could complete their pilot's flight test before they came to school. Clearly, this was also a great way to impress the ladies, as I ended up marrying one of those students, and so began my aviation journey. That young pilot went on to become a licensed aircraft maintenance engineer, a commercial fixed and rotary wing pilot, an aviation auditor and aviation business owner. We as a family made a conscious decision to live and raise our family in a rural community, and chose to invest and develop our GA business because these are our passions: family, aviation, regional communities. Our passage into general aviation was natural and achievable, as most airports in the 1980s were vibrant, jobs and opportunities plentiful and accessible to rural residents. Having started our career for aircraft maintenance providers for other aircraft maintenance providers and air operators, in 1998 we progressed to invest in considerable capital into our own maintenance facility. Starting out with an approval for only piston engine fixed-wing aircraft, we deliberately focused on industry diversity and grew our custom to include agriculture, flight training, skydiving, charter and private aircraft. In those heady days, we operated 7 days a week to cover scheduled work. We had up to 9 staff, including apprentices and contractors, and yet we still had a backlog. We willingly invested in developing our skills, qualifications and infrastructure to support our business and the changing industry. We continued to invest capital to keep in line with changing industry expectations, which resulted in us adding fixed-wing turbine, piston and turbine engine rotary winged aircraft to our approval. I make these points known as with each investment into our business to broaden our service delivery and scope and to keep abreast of the regulatory requirements, we observed a decline in our client base. Continuous review of our operations and business plans, modifications to our business models and adaptations made to reflect the needs of the industry was still not enough. We weren't losing clients to other maintenance providers, our clients were simply exiting the industry. Our investment was not restricted to Australian aviation, as we provided offshore services to clients in the South Pacific for many years, including investing to secure a PNG Part 145 approval, which enables us to provide maintenance in Papua New Guinea. At this same time, CASA Australia advised industry that it intended to introduce FAA Part 145 regulations for maintenance provision in this country. Again, we made the decision to be proactive and we made the necessary investment to prepare for those changes. We undertook the process of preparing and submitting our Australian Part 145 application for approval at our regional CASA office. We had invested considerable funds in writing manuals, preparing our facility for the application and approval process, only to be advised at the 11th hour that CASA had a change of heart in Australia. And we were now adopting the ASA, that is the European rules. Not only did this decision render our application and investment null and void, it created massive uncertainty for our future viability, as at that time, the ASA regulations had very limited GA scope. Industry expressed those concerns and were assured that the Australian version of these regulations would ensure GA was catered for and that our concerns were not valid. Sadly, to this very day, those assurances given by CASA at the time have not been delivered, and industry predictions of negative impact on the sector in Australia have come to fruition. Having already made a commitment to combat the decline in GA by diversifying our business, we were now forced to combat the fallout from CASA's change of heart. It was then that we applied for our air operator certificate, we purchased 2 helicopters, we engaged additional staff, and we commenced operating a helicopter flying school and charter business to help sustain our maintenance activities. Happily, for several years, our business diversification served us and the industry well. Unfortunately, due to family reasons, we sold the flight training and charter aspect of our business, which relocated to another regional area. Sadly, this business is no longer in operation. CASA has been undertaking a regulatory transition process for many decades now, which remains unfinalised to this day, resulting in a lack of certainty and investment confidence across the GA sector. Fueling this lack of confidence by industry is the regulatory consultation process, whereby industry is asked for and contribute their views, yet very often these views are ignored when the final regulations are released. So very many industry participants have lost faith. They've lost heart and they have lost respect for the regulator. Many existing businesses have made or are making the decision to exit the industry. This is resulting in businesses closing, jobs lost, and ultimately communities impacted. The result of these closures is a serious and rapid decline of highly skilled maintenance engineers. This decline is already having a serious impact on GA, as the loss of this skill set cannot be quickly replaced, especially in the regions. The business exodus is not only leading to loss of apprenticeship and employment opportunities for those who still wish to explore an aviation career pathway, it is impacting especially more difficultly in regional and rural communities. We are being told within our communities that the flying operations in the regions are also now being impacted because of the lack of aircraft maintenance, as it cannot be provided. The length of time this industry has been in regulatory transition is unfathomable. Coupled with the overcomplication and over-regulation of GA by policymakers who now have very little understanding of this sector or how it operates. This once vibrant sector has been effectively decimated, all done under the guise of safety. Many are questioning what safety benefits have really been achieved and what the decline has cost this nation. I close with this final comment. General aviation in Australia has often been described in this analogy. GA is to the larger aviation sector as Junior League is to the NRL. Without the foundation framework that develops young skills, passion and commitment, how will a robust and vibrant aviation industry continue to develop and sustain? General aviation has traditionally been the breeding ground that is the feeder to the next levels of the industry. Where will Australian aviation be in the future if GA continues to decline in the manner we are now witnessing? Thank you.
Mrs. Brown, thank you for your opening statement. I particularly reflect on your comment about general aviation being to the industry what the Junior Rugby League is to the senior teams. And you're quite right, it is definitely industry that means that we grow our own, we train our own, we have our own manufacturing and training and successful thriving businesses. I think it's a different sports analogy, but I think it works very well in this case. And I think it has been at our peril, Australia's peril, that we've allowed our feeder clubs to fall into disrepair. So thank you for that. I'm just going to ask a couple of questions. In your submission, you referred to a worrying scenario exists within the interpretation of rules, ADs, requirements, etc. It is often found that interpretation rather than solid clarification is offered by CASA representatives when contacted for assistance from industry. These interpretations differ from staff member to staff member. It has become obvious to industry that if CASA cannot agree to an interpretation, the clarification that industry needs can never be obtained. In summary, if our regulator cannot answer industry's questions, how can industry comply? I have been reading the previous review of the aviation industry held under Minister Warren Truss. One of those recommendations and issues raised then was consistency between CASA officers, between CASA officers and within CASA officers. I note that there has been some commentary by Mr. Carmody around a desire to, it's identified that consistency is an issue in May of 2019 and November of 2019. But what are you seeing from an industry point of view around steps towards CASA being consistent in its interpretations of regulations for industry?
I'd have to be honest and say that we haven't at this particular point seen any tangible evidence that anything has changed in regard to that consistency. I do understand that CASA is looking to implement a centralised contact point to address the concerns of industry. As industry, we haven't been given a lot of detail on that at this particular point in time, and that may have some merit, but I have to be honest in saying what absolutely concerns the industry is if we go down a path of a hub that everyone has to contact, and then CASA will get back to you when the duly appointed person can answer your questions. Our greatest concern is what is that going to do to the effectiveness and the efficiencies of continuing to operate within our business structure. Remembering that especially for maintenance orgs such as ourselves and many of our industry colleagues, time is of the essence. Those aircraft cost a lot of money when they're sitting on the ground. If we have a query, we need to have it addressed as quickly as possible. And Senators, I really need to say this. Our interaction with the CASA representatives on the ground in the field offices has been exceptional. The guys on the ground work very hard to support us as best they can. So we don't have an issue with the people that we are interacting with. They try their very level best to support and interact with us and engage with us and assist us because they know our businesses. They know the environment we're operating in, and they understand the challenges we're facing and our particular idiosyncrasies of each and every business. This is part of industry's concern. if we go to a central spot and we're dealing with someone who has no knowledge or understanding of the businesses and how we're operating and what our requirements are, what are going to be the impacts to our industry?
I think that's a good point to make about the local CASA representatives, because that's certainly the feedback that I get. The North Queensland or far North Queensland guys do a great job about trying to provide solutions. All right, can I ask you spoke about the impact of the CAS regulatory process and the delays in implementation on PA conflicts of business investment. I mean, you have provided some specific examples of that impact, but is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
No, I think our particular situation actually is a fairly good demonstration of it's often said that general aviation is in the state they're in because they're doing what they've always done, and I find that absolutely offensive for someone who's spent many decades in this industry, constantly looking at reviewing and trying to improve our business. We literally view it at that. It's a business and we're here for that reason, to run a good operation. Unfortunately, as I spoke about, a lot of impact that has happened to the decline in the industry is because a lot of businesses like us have just tried and reached a point where they just can't see the point of continuing anymore because it's non-viable. So they're walking away.
Well, that leads me to my next question. As a maintenance organisation, I'd like to hear about what you and your colleagues are experiencing in relation to the availability of skilled maintenance personnel in rural and regional Australia, because I can tell you every town I go to, it's terrifying. How on earth are we going to get aircraft maintained if there's just not enough skilled maintenance people available?
Yeah, absolutely. The availability of lamies is, as you identified, quite terrifying. What is even bigger concern is the age demographic of those lamies and the lack of the younger generation coming through. And more importantly, the younger generation that views rural and regional Australia as a lifestyle choice, that they would want to position themselves in those areas and support those businesses that are looking after the respective industries out there. I have for a long time expressed very grave concerns about where our future lamies are coming from. I am fortunate to be on the Part 66 TWG, so that's the technical working group for the lamie licences. And we've had quite a lot of conversation about this. I did know that the RAAA in their submission made reference to the misalignment of CASA and ASQA's processes that is impacting and compounding the problem within general aviation and more broadly for lamies. So that definitely, I can definitely speak to that. And a lot of my colleagues in not only the maintenance industry, but just in general aviation alone are all reflecting the same thing. The lamies in the regions are almost impossible to get a hold of.
So you mentioned in your opening comments that you have PNG Part 145 approval to provide maintenance in the PNG. Given you have experience working with other aviation regulators, can you provide some insight how that experience differs to the Australian CASA?
Yeah, I can. So we have PNG 145 approval. We worked with New Zealand when we were a parts distributor for a particular kind of aircraft, and we also worked with the FAA. But probably most aligned to what we do in Australia and what we do in PNG, basically deliver maintenance in both countries. In its simplest terms, it's easiest to say that the PNG system is incredibly simple and easy to work within. It's scalable. And in the simplest terms, the most defining difference, PNG is not prescriptive. PNG sets up an act, it sets up its regulations, and then it comes to each and every operator and asks us to tell them how we will comply with their regulations. Now, once we've done that and they've approved it, They hold us to account on that process. It is absolutely almost the reverse in Australia. We have a set of regulations that are trying to be so prescriptive and so legal and trying to cater for each and every scenario within the country possible. We end up with this magnitude of regulations that nobody can understand or interpret, and worse still, it's written in legal jargon. So the average bloke on the street really struggles, the average operator, to interpret what was meant by those words.
Do you believe CASA has any role in fostering a robust aviation industry in Australia?
CASA will tell us consistently that they don't, and I understand that they technically do not have a role to foster aviation in this country. But what I will say is this. CASA's role is to set up a clear, concise framework that enables the industry to get underway and get business happening. So in essence, CASA's role, yes, they do have a role in making the framework clear and concise, and then get out of the way. Let business do business. I heard Mr. McDermott say that CASA doesn't make the industry safe. He's 100% correct. Business and industry will make a robust and vibrant aviation industry, but we need a clear, concise framework with certainty so that enables us to do it, and with confidence, invest in our businesses and continue on. I mean, I fully support a lot of what John said. We're in this industry, that's our bums on those seats. We have so much at stake here. We don't need a regulator to tell us what we need to do to be safe. We have a safe culture. We develop that within our businesses. Let us do what we do best, provide us framework that we need to comply with.
Well said. All right, Senator Patrick, can I have a call to you, please?
Thank you very much. You said that you had embarked down an FAA pathway, understanding that that's what CASA was going to do. They switched to EASA and gave you assurances. Were those assurances in writing?
No.
Okay.
No. We were told at many workshops that we attended, so we being industry, I'm speaking collectively, when we raised concerns, we were assured that yes, there was acknowledgement that EASA did not have a robust GA sector, but we were assured that the regulations would be modified in Australia and that the Australian GA sector would be taken care of, and to be patient with CASA and it would happen. And as I mentioned, we're still not seeing it yet. Those regulations still haven't been finalised.
So the regulations haven't been finalised or simply haven't been modified? Or sorry,
the modification.
The question goes to whether or not there is a modification going on and it hasn't been completed yet, or whether there is no intention to modify.
No, there's a modification happening. CASA's version of the modification, it has been happening for quite a considerable number of years, and it continues as we speak, but it's still not finalised.
So does that mean that you are running under the original EASA regulations, or is this released to you in dribs and drabs?
Dribs and drabs.
Okay.
So we're running under some crossover of different regulations.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned in your submission that you'd put in an operations manual. 2.5 years it took to review it. Has that review been completed?
I don't know that. I'd have to go back and check on that one. We don't
actually,
have an
sorry,
operations
my
manual.
apologies. My apologies. That might have been McDermott. My apologies. Just want to go to cost. Obviously, there's a cost associated with your business in terms of meeting the regulations. McDermott indicated about 3.5 people in his organisation. What's the size of your organisation, and how much of it is spent dealing with CASA regulation?
Senator, our organisation at this particular point in time and for the last couple of years has been deliberately downsizing. We are one of those businesses I spoke about. We are planning our exit and transition out of this industry. Because we identified about 5 years ago that we'd done all that we possibly could from a business perspective to try and reinvent ourselves and remain sustainable. So we've made a very, very conscious decision to start to transition out. And we are investing in other industries not related to aviation. So we are currently running on probably 10% of our capacity. And at that point right here, right now, we have myself and my husband and one other full-time staff member who, takes probably 20% of the time around compliance. But, we're in aviation. We acknowledge that there will always be a component of time and money spent on compliance, and we have no problem with that. What we do have a problem with is the lack of certainty of what that regulation is going to be next week, next month, next year.
Okay, I just want to go to a question I asked other witnesses. Last year in October, the Senate or the Parliament changed the Civil Aviation Act, requiring CASA to have regard to, in effect, GA, making sure that it considered the commercial effect of its regulations or its effect on businesses and individuals, and also to recognise there's a difference between an A380 and a Cessna 172. Have you, in the last year, seen any changes that might be a result of that command from the Parliament?
I'd have to be brutally honest and say no. And I'll refer specifically again to something that relates to our region and to a lot of our colleagues that is currently underway, and that is the Part 138 MOS. So it's a set of regulations that has impact on aerial work operators, flying ops, aeromedical retrieval, and it's a process that is, as we speak, underway and being finalised. And I know that the technical working group that advised the project leaders on that one expressed their concerns around what was being proposed and the impact it will have on businesses. They went so far as in their initial report to say that they did not support the MOS as it was going to be put out to industry for consultation. It still went out to industry for consultation in April, in the middle of COVID, in the middle of the mustering season where many of these people had to respond. There was very good response, which identified the challenges and what the impact would be to those businesses. They expressed their concerns. There has been some very slight modification to the final version that was released last week or the week before, but we did not see what we expected to be the modification and changes and alteration to the regulation that we thought CASA would take on board, especially in light of those changes that were made to the Act.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Patrick. Mrs. Brown, Senator Sterle, thank you. I know how vitally interested you are in aviation regionally across Australia, but yes, thank you for acknowledging our time pressures. Yeah. Brown, invite you if there's anything additionally that's come out of asking questions. Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Sterle does have a question for you.
Yeah, so, Chair, thanks very much. I am mindful of time. It's just a statement, Mrs. Brown, if I can say. Your words are so true. There is a trend in this nation that we're killing off the nurseries for our skills, whether it be in shipping, whether it be in road transport, whether it be in aviation. The sad part is when we hear Mr. Morgan's words, we've had so many of these things. We just continue to go along this path. Problems are raised and nothing gets done. Sorry, Chair, but it's a statement, it's frustration. No wonder the industry's pulling its hair out. Thank you for your Chair.
Absolutely concur, Senator Searle. As you can appreciate, we live with that every single day of our lives, and it's why the frustration of the industry is now bubbling up to the point of almost being acrimonious, because we just can't take it anymore. You can only take so much.
Yep.
Ms Brown, I understand your frustrations. I hear it as I travel right across the country, particularly regionally, where it's just so difficult to get the skilled workforce to carry out maintenance or to fly the aircraft or to continue in businesses regionally, particularly in aviation. So I really appreciate your time today. As I said, I invite you to make any additional submissions following on from the questions today or the evidence that's provided. And please go as the committee states.
Thank you very, very much for the opportunity to speak out about challenges in the industry. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.